If you think you've heard every babysitter horror story, think again. This one isn't urban legend, it's real. So before we start, hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear might just make you double-check your locks tonight. It was a quiet Friday night in the small town of Maplewood, Wisconsin, when 17-year-old Lindsay Carter was supposed to babysit for the Wallaces, a young couple with a 3-year-old daughter named Sophie. Lindsay was well known in the neighborhood. Smart, polite, dependable. She had been babysitting since she was 14. But on October 12, 1998, she never came home. The Wallaces left their cozy 2-story house around 7 p.m. for a dinner anniversary. Everything was normal. Lindsay arrived early, helped tuck Sophie into bed, and even called her mom around 8:15 to say everything was fine. That was the last time anyone ever heard her voice. At 11:47 p.m., the Wallaces pulled into their driveway. Their house looked untouched. The front light was still on, the TV was softly buzzing, and Sophie was fast asleep in her room. But when they checked the living room, Lindsay's purse was on the couch, her jacket on the chair, and her shoes neatly by the door. The only thing missing was her. At first, police believed she might have left to meet someone. Maybe a boyfriend, maybe a friend. But Lindsay wasn't that kind of girl. Everyone said it. Her mom swore she never went anywhere without calling. Even her best friend Erin told officers. Lindsay was scared of walking home alone after dark. Something wasn't right. By morning, Maplewood was in panic. Flyers went up, volunteers searched the woods, and helicopters hovered over the nearby river. For days, nothing. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no calls. Lindsay had simply vanished. Then came the first clue. 2 days later, a neighbor's security camera, an old VHS system barely working, showed a dark sedan pulling up near the Wallace house around 9:30 that night. The footage was grainy, but a tall figure could be seen stepping out, walking toward the porch and disappearing out of frame. Police couldn't make out a face or a license plate. But the real twist came from the 911 call that no one could explain. At 10:12 p.m., dispatch received a short, muffled call from the Wallace's landline. Just 3 words, "He's inside now." Then silence. Technicians later confirmed it came from that house, but the Wallaces were still at the restaurant at that time. The only person who could have made that call was Lindsay. The discovery turned the case upside down. Who was he? How did he get in? Nothing in the house was broken, no forced entry. The front door had been locked when the Wallaces returned. Detective Mark Reynolds, the lead investigator, described the case as the quietest scream I've ever heard. For weeks they chased leads. A drifter seen near the highway, a former boyfriend of Erin's who had a history of stalking, even a delivery driver who worked that night. Every lead ended the same way, dead. Then a month later, just as the search began to fade, a local fisherman found something floating along the edge of Lake Mendota, 30 miles away. A small silver bracelet engraved with the name Lindsay. Her mother confirmed it was hers. The area was sealed off. Divers searched the waters. Drones scanned the nearby woods. But what they found next made even seasoned officers go pale. Inside a rusted drain pipe near the shoreline was a single white sneaker, soaked and caught between the rocks. The same brand, same size, Lindsay wore that night, and stuck to the sole was a dark strand of hair. When forensic results came back a week later, the lab confirmed what everyone feared. It wasn't hers. Someone else had been there that night, and whoever he hadn't stopped watching. By the time the bracelet and sneaker were found, the case had gripped every news outlet in Wisconsin. The words, "Where is Lindsay Carter?" flashed across television screens night after night. But for Detective Mark Reynolds, the discovery wasn't closure, it was just the beginning. Lindsay's sneaker had a dark hair tangled in the sole, but the DNA didn't match anyone in the national database. It wasn't hers, not the Wallace, not even the neighbors. That meant one terrifying thing. Whoever he was, he'd done this before, or was careful enough never to be caught. Reynolds and his team decided to dig deeper. They re-examined the 911 call, running it through enhanced audio systems. What they discovered chilled everyone. Under Lindsay's trembling voice, another faint sound could be heard, a male whisper, almost like a warning. 2 words. Don't scream. The police believed Lindsay might have recognized her attacker. There were no signs of forced entry, no smashed windows. He'd likely been someone she trusted. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone from school. They started interviewing everyone who had seen her that day. Erin, her best friend, said Lindsay mentioned something odd earlier that week, how she'd been getting strange phone calls at night. The caller never said anything, just breathed heavily and hung up. When Erin told her to tell her mom, Lindsay laughed it off. Probably some prank, she'd said. That detail changed everything. Phone company records showed several blocked calls to the Wallace's house and to Lindsay's cell days before her disappearance. But when detectives traced the origin, all of them led to the same place, a payphone near the Maplewood bus terminal. Security footage from the terminal wasn't clear, but one clip showed a man in a dark hoodie standing by that payphone around 8 o'clock p.m. the night Lindsay vanished. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing gloves, and walked with a slight limp. Reynolds froze the frame and looked closer. Something about the man's posture, the tilt of his head. It felt familiar. Then it hit him. A few weeks earlier, during canvassing, an older man from the same neighborhood had insisted the police stop searching his property. His name was Ray Peterson, a retired mechanic who lived 2 streets from the Wallaces. He said he didn't want media people trampling his yard. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now, it didn't. Reynolds decided to pay Ray another visit. When the detective knocked, Ray opened the door almost too quickly, his smile forced and eyes darting. "Back again? You people won't rest, huh?" "We just need to ask a few follow-ups," Reynolds replied calmly. Inside, the house smelled of oil and cigarette smoke. Old car parts were stacked everywhere. On the wall hung dozens of framed newspaper clippings about missing persons, most yellowed and curling with age. Reynolds' partner whispered, "This guy collects stories about missing girls." Ray laughed when they asked him about Lindsay. "That poor kid? Shame what happened. But I didn't see her that night. Was fixing an engine." "Alone?" Reynolds asked. Ray's jaw tightened. "Yeah, why?" The detectives left shortly after, but something gnawed at Reynolds. Ray's garage floor had fresh concrete patches near the back wall. When asked, Ray claimed it was for plumbing work. 3 days later, investigators obtained a warrant. They tore up the garage floor and found what looked like a small metal box, rusted and locked shut. Inside were women's jewelry pieces, rings, earrings, and a small silver pendant engraved with the letter L. Forensics confirmed fingerprints on the box matched Ray Peterson's. When the police returned to arrest him, his truck was gone. The back door was left open, the lights still on. He'd vanished. 2 days later, hikers reported finding a campsite deep in the woods by Lake Mendota. Inside the tent were Ray's clothes, a half-empty whiskey bottle, and a photograph of Lindsay taped to the inside wall. But that wasn't what froze Detective Reynolds in place. Behind the photo, folded neatly, was a handwritten note on yellow paper. It said, "You're digging in the wrong place. She's not in the lake." The note found in Ray Peterson's campsite sent the entire investigation spiraling into chaos. If Lindsay wasn't in the lake, then where was she? And why would Ray, a man on the run, take the time to leave that kind of message? Detective Reynolds couldn't shake the feeling that the note was a game. A final taunt from a man who wanted to be caught, but on his own terms. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike, but matched the writing in old mail recovered from Peterson's home. That night, the investigative team combed through the evidence again. The phone records, the jewelry, the whispers on the 911 call. Everything pointed to Ray. But something was missing. Then came the break they didn't expect. While reviewing photos of the jewelry box found in Ray's garage, one officer noticed a faint engraving on the bottom, initials that read RT. Not Ray Peterson. RT. Reynolds froze. Who the hell is RT? A database search led them to Robert Thompson, Ray's former co-worker from the auto shop where they'd both worked in the early 2000s. Thompson had disappeared years earlier, reportedly moving out of state. But the shop's old record showed the two had shared a storage unit for over a decade, one that had been paid for under Ray's name. When police raided the unit, what they found made national headlines. Inside were 8 boxes, each labeled with a woman's name and a year. Inside each box, neatly folded clothing, old newspaper clippings, and personal items belonging to local women who had gone missing across a span of 15 years. One of those boxes had Lindsay Carter, 2022, written on the lid. There were no remains, no blood, just her phone, her bracelet, and a VHS tape. When the footage was restored, it showed Lindsay sitting in a small room, alive but terrified. The date stamp was 1 day after her disappearance. She was pleading to the camera, "Please, I just want to go home." Behind the camera, a deep voice replied, "You will, but not yet." The voice wasn't Ray's. It matched Robert Thompson. FBI agents immediately expanded the search. They learned that Robert had died in 2015, a car accident in another state. But his death certificate had been signed by none other than Ray Peterson, his best friend. That's when the horrifying truth became clear. Ray Peterson had been living under 2 identities, his own and Robert's. He had used Robert's name to rent properties, open accounts, and create an alibi trail that made him almost untraceable. For years, he had stalked young women under the guise of his deceased friend, keeping souvenirs of each one like trophies of his crimes. Lindsay was his last known victim. 2 months after the storage unit discovery, a hiker stumbled upon a shallow grave near the riverbed 3 miles from Ray's property. DNA confirmed it was Lindsay Carter. Her case closed one of the longest-running abduction chains in the state. But the ending wasn't clean. When police analyzed Ray's campsite note again, they found a faint fingerprint not his. It belonged to another man never identified. And behind the handwriting analysis, forensic linguists noted a chilling discovery. The note's phrasing and grammar didn't match Ray's past writings. It seemed someone else had written it, someone who might have been helping him, someone who might still be out there. As Detective Reynolds stood over Lindsay's grave weeks later, he said quietly to a reporter, "People think monsters hide in the dark, but sometimes they live right next door."